of cases and hospital system capacity, but we're still seeing a daily loss of life that is very real. And it's not just the loss of life, it is the tremendous burden and pain on even those who survive. You know, the folks who are on a ventilator is an incredibly invasive procedure. It's very difficult. And there's a lot that goes along with that. And then you layer on top of that the economic anxiety and concern and isolation and everything. And, you know, this is a significant challenge. And it's one I know that we all will get through, and we know that we will get through it. And we know that we will rebuild and we will recover. But I do think it's important that we just, you know, we all have to keep in mind that this is, I get asked a lot, when are we going to go back to normal? And the reality is, until such time as we have a vaccine or a specific treatment, we're going to be in a new status for a while of mitigation, of containment, of monitoring the progress, of turning the dial one way, monitoring the results, perhaps turning them back a little bit. And so really figuring out how we navigate best through this very difficult and challenging time. And it's why it's so important that the efforts we do around care and help to communities that have historically been left behind. And there's a lot of historic inequities that are being surfaced here in a very real way, in terms of inequity of healthcare, inequity of access to testing. There was a whole Harvard study out about the increased mortality for folks who live in environmental justice communities with air pollution and what that does to respiratory issues, and so a series of those. And so all of our efforts around making sure that, whether it's the immediacy of ensuring people aren't going to get kicked out of their house or their apartment, the immediacy of ensuring your power's not going to get turned off, the immediacy of ensuring you're going to have food and access to healthcare, regardless of your status or ability to pay, is important. But I think really, as we move forward, really having a very intentional focus around addressing a lot of those inequities in our society that are creating disproportionate impacts. Public health is really exasperating issues that many of us work on daily around that. And I think that's a place, hopefully, that the regional task force or our reinvestment task force can continue to play a role. You know, the whole spirit of the Community Reinvestment Act is ensuring greater equity, ensuring greater access, ensuring greater equality. And so I think the role that we play in this is not only going to help us in the immediacy of confronting the challenge we face, but is going to play a vital role in you know, what ought to be a realignment of what we do, and a lot of things coming out of this. And so I just say that to say we you know, everyone is busy with the immediacy of the challenge we face today, and we have to stay there and continue to provide that. But I think the role that groups like this play are going to take on increasing importance moving forward in what we do. I know we have a packed agenda, and a lot of folks, is obviously the first time we've ever met remotely. So thank you, everyone, for the widespread adoption of Zoom. I heard the conversation earlier about kids, and we're managing that in our household with multiple kids and multiple class settings, and, you know, both of us doing things. And so we appreciate everyone's continued effort. I know today we're going to hear from a representative from Member of Congress Scott Peters, 3 of our ethnic chambers of commerce, the Small Business Development Center, member banks, particularly about efforts we can do, things we can do to help small businesses. And so we have a packed agenda. We will jump right into it. But let's start, turn over to my co-chair, Councilmember Montgomery.
Thank you, Supervisor. Hey, everyone. It's really good to see your faces. I'll be really quick here, just for people who may be watching I think we're on YouTube. Is it YouTube? We'll know soon enough. But there will be people watching. And so we just want to quickly go over who we are as the San Diego City County Reinvestment Task Force. So in 1977, the Community Reinvestment Act was enacted to ensure that our banks meet the needs of our communities, particularly low to moderate income communities. So we'll hear a little bit more about that in item 5. Hopefully most of us will still be here. I know we've all are running in 10 different directions, even though we're mostly in front of a computer. So at the local level, it is our responsibility as a board to monitor the percentage or level of reinvestment that major local banks are making into our communities. And now is an important time as ever to ensure that we're still making those investments. We know that crises in general do affect LMI communities even more, just based on the original position of low and moderate income communities. So our work becomes that much more important. And so right now I'll just have the members introduce yourselves very briefly, and we could just probably go in order of our screens. So
does that mean it's me first? I don't want to skip Daisy.
maybe we're all different. Like,
Yeah.
I think we are all different.
okay, so what we'll do is we have all of our names are there. Before you speak today, just introduce yourself and where you're from, and then we can move on from there since we have different orders. Okay, and I'll turn it over back to Supervisor Fletcher.
Thank you. We'll go to agenda item 2, non-agenda public comment. How this works, public comment is being handled via the web form. The link is in the agenda. Public comment received before the start of the meeting will be read aloud by the clerk during the appropriate item. Public comment received during the meeting may be read aloud during the meeting if logistics allow. Otherwise, the comments will be distributed to the RTF members and inserted into the meeting record. Julia, can you please read into the record any public comments you have at this time, if any?
Hi, Julia Sauer with the Housing Commission. There are no non-agenda public comments.
Perfect. We will go to agenda item 3, task force member comments. I want to open the floor to anyone who has any brief comments or items that they wish to share with the group.
So actually, I would like to offer up that we're having a fair housing conference. This is Stephen Russell with the San Diego Housing Federation, and we're having a fair housing conference in May, and we'll be advertising that. I'm looking for the date right now. Laura, do you have the date in front of you? It was originally scheduled for
Steve,
April.
I
This
can
is
look
Fair
it up.
Housing Month.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm afraid
Thank
I
you.
don't at the moment. But just to clarify, it will be via webinar in response to our current situation. But yes, we can find that date and get the information out. This year's conference will also be, I believe we're not having a charge for this year. Sorry, kids in the background.
Perfect. Is there anyone else? All right. Seeing none, we will move to item 4, approval of the minutes. I would make a motion to approve the minutes from the February 10th, 2019 regular meeting of the Reinvestment Task Force. Is there a second?
I will second.
All right. Have a second by the co-chair. Any discussion, comments, questions? All right. Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Item 5, the staff report has been moved to the end to accommodate our speakers' schedules. So we will go to agenda item number 6, small business assistant programs in need. We're going to give
Supervisor,
yes.
There were 2 sets of minutes. Can we really quickly vote on November just so we button that up, please?
Yeah.
I'm
so
sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So we have for the November meeting. All right, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the November meeting.
I will second again.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right,
Aye.
thank you, Daisy.
Thank you.
Staff report will move. So let's jump into our small business. They're going to talk about available government economic assistance programs and some of the business chambers. We're going to hear from them about what they're experiencing, what they're hearing, what they're seeing. We're going to start with Danny Fitzgerald from San Diego and Imperial County SBDC Network. Danny will address programs and what you're hearing from small businesses and some results of a recent survey you did. So Danny, we welcome you.
Thank you, Supervisor and fellow members of the Regional Task Force. Probably many of you have seen, the variety of webinars that we've been doing, and I appreciate the cooperation of many different organizations and so forth. So we're going to start with, I guess we'll start with the tricky news, the elephant in the room, and I'm sure Jason from Congressman Peters' office will be able to talk a little bit about that. The SBA last night put out a press release announcing a temporary suspension of EIDL loans and PPP loans applications due to a lack of an appropriations for for the program, the two federal programs. We, in short, we're obviously along right there with our small businesses that we assist in the frustrations around that. And like I say in the webinars, I'm not a member of Congress. I don't work for the SBA. I can't control what they do. We can merely communicate and attempt to assist what people have. We're continuing to assist people in preparation and anticipation that that switch will be turned back on, and work with them. But more so, what we're doing a lot of now, which has been good, is being able to assist people who've applied for these programs and are beginning to receive loan offers. And we've even had one success of an actual disbursement of an economic injury disaster loan that she applied for early on in the process. And so a couple of things to kind of think about that is, so from the Small Business Development Center perspective, again, we're a resource partner of the U.S. Small Business Administration, as well as the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. They're our primary two funding sources. We have multiple, when we're open, physical locations throughout the county. Our subcontractors include, for example, here, who will speak momentarily, Wes from the Asian Business Association, but also Miracosta College, University of San Diego, Connect, San Diego Regional EDC, International Rescue Committee, who's also on this call, East County EDC, and out in Imperial County as well. And we have about 80 different business advisors, and we're actively working with the clients day in and day out. We received a spike in requests for assistance, like we'd never really obviously seen before. We went from what our monthly average new client request was down, turning that into a daily client request. And so since the crisis started kind of there about March 16th, we've served over 2,000 small businesses through training and counseling. Many of them have applied for the EIDL and the PPP programs, and we're continuing to assist them in many different ways. In addition, we are also assisting them with other different programs that have come. Some have come and gone, included the City of San Diego Small Business Relief Fund, which was an excellent opportunity. And we work very closely with the City of San Diego staff, the Economic Development Director, Christina Biebler, Elizabeth Studebaker, and Lydia Moreno. They called us up immediately as these funds were coming out to make sure that we were able to provide the assistance that people needed. As people are getting requests for additional assistance, we're providing that for them. And so that's been a great local program. There have been different programs that CDC Small Business Finance has had. We've assisted folks with those. There have been other grants that have come out, such as the ones that LISC have done with Verizon. And we're seeing more of those also start to come out. And as now the state of California is putting together its programs and enhancing the iBank in terms of its loan guarantees, we anticipate some other local programs to be able to come out too. So we're looking forward to being able to assist the folks with these different things. In short, what we're hearing, I want to kind of talk a little bit about that. Both kind of pre and post last night with the announcements. I think the common refrain is confused and frustrated, and for small business owners as they're navigating things, they recognize the need for all the public health orders that are in place, but they're trying to figure out how to navigate through uncertain times. When I was on a webinar earlier this month with the Assemblymember Todd Gloria, I think he summed it up really well when he said, in all his work with small business owners, the number one thing they want is certainty, and that's the one thing that's most lacking right now. And so we're trying to get them a little bit of certainty, or at least some bridge during these times, to hopefully be able to continue to function and work into the future. So the confused, the frustrated, the difficult things that are happening, in particular with our low to moderate income businesses, and I want to emphasize it, and give a huge shout out, since they're on here, the work of the International Rescue Committee, the Asian Business Association, and then of course, who aren't on here, all our advisors at Southwestern College, East County as well, in North County, that are working with folks that don't understand these programs and are getting, don't understand how to navigate them, don't understand how necessarily to go through those, or even worse, don't have, because they're not a big business or even a mid-sized business, they're not a multi-million-dollar business, they don't have a banking relationship. And it's really unfortunate that finally this week there were some good lenders coming out that were able to work with those, and the switch got turned off. We saw a loan out in Imperial County with not a very sophisticated business in 2 days got approved with PayPal. And to see that turned off was kind of sad and frustrating. Earlier today, I got a text from someone who's she owns her own LLC. She doesn't have employees. It's just that's how she operates hers. She's been waiting to apply and trying to apply with the PPP, and she texted me a screenshot of saying it's turned off. And she said, all I can do right now is cry. So it's difficult. We're doing a lot of active listening to the small business owners, working with them, but more so trying to help them navigate and get these. The good news is there are a lot of people that are getting their EIDL advances. That's important. And there are folks who are getting their disbursements, soon for the Paycheck Protection. The thing that we're most worried about and still have been stressing for weeks in partnership with many organizations, including the SBA, the City of San Diego, are scams. Where people are getting, I've seen screenshots of texts where it's like, for $2,500, I'll help you make sure you get the access to the federal programs. When in reality, there's no cost to apply. And, there's plenty of free assistance that's out there. And so those are the types of things we're worried about. Or I've had them get emails from some email saying, hey, you just, to follow up on the loan you just applied for, I need this personally identifiable information. And so we're stressing to people that make sure it's from the bank you applied with, it's from SBA.gov, or like in the city's example, San Diego.gov. And if you have any questions, contact the folks at the city, the SBA district office, us, chambers of commerce, and so forth. And we're trying to help people kind of navigate through some of those. But in short, I want to let the others kind of talk, because they're also doing a lot of great work with the partnerships. We of course partner, have the Asian Business Association is one of our partners, work of course closely with the Hispanic Chamber as well as the Central Black Chamber, work with many of the folks of you on here, with Accion, with LISC, and many partnerships, and Supervisor Fletcher working very closely with Susan there at your office as well, and appreciate all of that support. So we're here, we're trying to help as many small businesses as we can. We're open, we're working, all of us from home, and we have our team of 80 advisors that are scattered throughout the region here to assist, and we're not stopping. The loans may be turned off, but we're still here, and we're continuing to work. And thanks to the CARES Act, our programs, the Small Business Development Center, and also our sister program, the Women's Business Center, we're getting some significant additional funding to really kind of expand even that effort. That's going to allow us to do work well into the recovery phase of this. That's funding that's allowed, we'll be able to utilize for 18 to 24 months. So thank you again for the opportunity to come here. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Danny. And I want you to know, my office appreciates your work. I know we've been working on a number of things together, and we're grateful for your effort. I want to reiterate to everyone, the District Attorney's Office has set up a special fraud hotline, and we can share that information. But if anyone is trying to price gouge, take advantage, run scams during this crisis, times of difficulty and challenge often bring out the best in people, and you see a lot of really moving, wonderful things, but it also shows the nature of some other folks. And I know I've talked to our district attorney multiple times, and they are very aggressively and very swiftly moving to bring the full force of the law on anyone who's trying to prey on individuals during this time period, whether that be a scam like you referenced, whether that be price gouging, whether that be any of those types of things. And so we can share the DA's hotline, but would really encourage anyone, if you see that at all, give them a call. I know that they would love to get out and enforce those. Next, we have Jason Berkovich from Congressman Scott Peters' office to share information about federal relief efforts and an update from their office. Jason, it's all yours.
You guys hear me?
Gotcha.
Good. So thanks again. Thank you, Supervisor Fletcher. Thank you, Councilmember Montgomery, for the invitation to speak today with the task force. I'll piggyback a little off of what Danny was saying, and really want to praise Danny and his team and everybody over at the SBDC, as well as all of you partners on this endeavor. We know how quickly moving things are right now, and we're trying our best to really manage, given the circumstances, which are incredibly difficult for a lot of people. So first of all, I'll talk about kind of what we've done, and then I'll talk a little bit more about where we're at right now and some of the negotiations in the context of what's going on in DC. A big thing that I like to bring up when talking to small business owners out there is there's 3 different buckets that we want people to be looking at. And Danny spoke about these a little bit, but I try to break it down. So for example, we've got the economic injury disaster loan. That is a specific SBA loan. So when people are looking to apply for that, they're going directly to the SBA website in order to submit that application. Although initially that loan was supposed to be capped off at $2 million, we are well aware that due to budget restrictions and given the amount of applications that have been received, the loans that are being issued have been for significantly less. So that is something that we'll talk a little bit more about, but it is something that we're looking at. So again, that is a direct SBA loan. Then we have our SBA loan guarantee programs. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard about the PPP program, Paycheck Protection. That is an SBA guaranteed loan. So for those loans, you're going to go to your financial institutions, and your financial institutions are generally going to take those applications, collect the necessary paperwork, and put that through the process then to the SBA for the guarantee. And then the third thing that we're looking at, so you got SBA loans, SBA guaranteed loans, and finally tax benefits. Some of us might be aware that yesterday was our original tax day. And of course, given the situation, we were fortunate to have the IRS extend that both for businesses as well as for individual filers who understand the difficulties that people are going through. So not only has tax day been extended, but there's been a series of tax credits that have been expanded really to help out our small businesses. And you can look at, there's the employee retention tax credit, there's the deferral of payroll taxes, there are various paid leave tax credits that have been implemented as well. So we really want to encourage small business owners to look at all these different programs, because what's great too is in many of these situations, you can qualify for multiple programs. So you might be able to obtain an SBA loan and take advantage of some of the tax credits. You might be able to get an EIDL and then get a PPP and pay off some of the EIDL loans. So we really want to encourage you to reach out to Danny and his team with SBDC, speak with your accountants and your tax advisors, and check and see what the best programs are for you, keeping in mind that you may be able to take advantage of multiple programs. On that note, as Danny mentioned, we did originally appropriate $349 billion specifically for the PPP program. We've seen the excitement and the energy for businesses trying to take advantage of that program, which is an amazing program, and it's specifically to help small businesses to keep their staff on payroll. That's the biggest thing that we've been emphasizing, is trying to keep people on payroll. We know that we have millions and millions of Californians and San Diegans and people across the country going on unemployment. So we're trying our best to work with small business owners to keep them on the payroll. Moving into what we're discussing right now, though, is given that that $349 billion has really been used up, we are looking to add additional funding to the program. However, what we've heard is there are certain difficulties that people are running into, not just with the application process that we would want to fix, but also with who that money is going to. We know that there are specific difficulties that people that are what we call unbanked are running into. If you have a small business owner that doesn't necessarily have an expansive relationship with a financial institution, it can be a lot more difficult for them, first of all, to find a place that is willing to take those applications, and not just finding where they can apply, but also to obtain the paperwork that they need. Looking up your tax returns, looking up your P&Ls, profit and loss statements, looking up different cash flows. Those are very difficult for somebody that's really a really small business. If you might just have one restaurant that you're managing, or you might just be a plumber that's doing it on your own. So there's difficulties that we would want to address with the new bill. We also understand that for our minority-owned small businesses, and also for our women-owned small businesses, there have been some troubles that we've heard about. So we're really fighting to make sure that when this money is put forth, that it is available to everybody that needs it across the board, no matter what your financial relationship is with a bank, no matter what your race, religion, sexual orientation, whatever that business is. We want everybody to be able to access those funds. And that's largely where the negotiations are right now, is making sure that the pot is available for everybody that's needed, and it's not being used up entirely for certain demographics. And finally, the one thing that I would add is, although you might see the background looking like a desk, we are all working remotely currently. We occasionally stop into the office because we do receive important correspondence by mail that we have to make sure that we're getting through. But we are all working remotely, but we are very much available. So a lot of the battle that the congressman is doing in Washington, D.C. is specifically based on stories that we're receiving from the community. The way that we fix problems with the PPP program or the economic injury disaster loans or concerns about these tax credits is because we hear directly from small business owners. When you run into a problem, we want you to reach out to us and let us know what that problem is so that we can search for a legislative fix. We can work with the IRS. We can work with the Treasury. We can work with the SBA to find ways for these programs to work for everybody. So I really encourage everybody to contact our office if you have an issue. The number is 858-455-5550. Please give us a call. We are going through those voicemails on a daily basis, and we want to hear from you, because if we don't know what you are running into on the ground as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, it's very difficult for us to then try to figure out how to make these programs better. We know that they're working, but we can always do better. And we want to hear from you to ensure that these programs work as best as possible. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Supervisor.
Thank you, Jason. Our next speaker is Wesley Quach, the Small Business Development Center Director of the Asian Business Association, represents the interest of more than 30,000 Asian-owned businesses countywide. Pre-pandemic, the annual gross sales generated by the Asian-owned San Diego County businesses exceeded $4 billion and employed over 50,000 people locally with a payroll of over $1 billion. Wesley, we welcome you and look forward to hearing from you on the needs and impacts of the communities and the businesses that you represent.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Mr. Fletcher. So like Danny mentioned, we are part of the SBDC network. We've been helping our clients and our members through these tough times and applying for all different types of loans, right? We talked about the EIDL and the PPP, as well as the City Small Business Relief Fund. Currently, it's pretty much a waiting game at this point. We have roughly 24 million in loans and assistance that our clients have applied for, and we've secured maybe 3 million of that. Being in the Asian Business Association, we're kind of in this unique position where a lot of our clients or our members were experiencing the effects of the coronavirus as early as January of this year, right? And so a lot of our clients who are restaurant owners noticed that there was a noticeable dip in patronage at the restaurants, maybe due to misinformation or people not sure if go into a Chinese restaurant if they would get the virus or not. And so that was a factor earlier on. We have one client who is a travel agent, and most of their bookings are vacations to Asia. And starting January, they had to cancel a lot of trips, offer a lot of refunds. And so actually, before this virus became a pandemic, we actually had a joint press conference with Nathan Fletcher and Councilmember Chris Cate, kind of addressing these issues on racism and bigotry and trying to encourage patronage at our Asian-owned businesses. Obviously, since then, things have changed tremendously. We had a huge increase in client applications, people looking for assistance. A few weeks ago, we actually did hire on a few additional staff members to help out with the workload. And we are continuing to offer one-on-one counseling services to our businesses, despite the EIDL applications being closed for the time being. We're just gearing our businesses up to prepare in the event that more funding is available. And when that happens, they have all their documents, everything ready to go. One other struggle with a lot of our Asian-owned businesses might be a technology or a language barrier. And so obviously they require more finesse, kind of more hands-on to get their applications in. And so like Danny said, we are part of the SBDC network. So if anyone is looking for assistance, they can go to sdivsbdc.org to find the center closest to them. Otherwise, at the Asian Business Association, we are located, normally in Kearney Mesa, we are working remotely as well. You can also visit our website at abasd.org/SBDC.
Thank you, Wesley. We appreciate that. Next, I want to introduce Donna DeBerry, the president of the Central San Diego Black Chamber of Commerce, whose mission is creating generational wealth through business enterprise, education, employment, and investing. Dawn is also a very respected data analyst, and she'll share information as to the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on communities of color. We're pleased to have you, Donna, and we'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I just realized I was on mute. Thank you so much for having me on here. I want to begin by saying, first of all, this is a repeat for me. I've been through Katrina, and I just feel like I'm closing my eyes as opposed to a flood. It's a virus. And at the time, the governor hired me to come in and do a disparity study on small businesses, and also to create a task force because we lost so many of our small businesses because of the flood, and the attrition rate was just unbelievable. And so again, here I stand with a virus that is absolutely impacting our community. And to me, there's a very unique vulnerability around Black-owned businesses and neighborhoods that's been created by COVID-19. From the day I have not, I don't even know what it's like not to be on the phone. It's been call after call after call. I feel like I'm working 24 hours a day, just trying to help our small businesses in the Black community. Number one, we did have an opportunity to put a small task force together to get feedback and insights on what's going on in the communities that we serve. And I can tell you, many of us are seeing this disproportionate impact for businesses as well as the health of individuals in the community. And we're also experiencing, for us, what's so unique about it is that this decade of systemic inequalities that have been targeting the Black community. But this is our opportunity to grapple with it in a very meaningful way. And so the question that many of our Black businesses and communities are asking is, how can we not just flatten this curve, but how do we flatten a racial curve that's happening for Black businesses and the community at large? There are two major concerns that have come out of the meetings that I've had with our members and non-members, by the way. And one is around, obviously, health disparities. We all know that that's been a national conversation about the disparities in the country and how it's been magnified in a crisis like this in the community. And the second is around our Black business owners that have definitely talked about equality and equity and available funding in helping their businesses survive as well as to rebuild. And so our goal here is just to be able to monitor those things. And I want to begin with the very first thing about the health disparities and questions and comments and recommendations that our communities have brought forth. And the first thing is around testing in the neighborhoods and in the communities. We know that many don't have transportation. They live in outer line communities, and they really want to make sure that they have testing sites in the communities. And those that have testing sites, it's just the clinics that should be having these testings don't have them at the moment, or it's been some disparities around that. And so they just want to make sure that these testing sites are available in their communities. The second conversation which was interesting, I had with a bus driver, a construction worker, and a couple of others, is really them talking about their frontline workers just as much as healthcare workers are. And they're doing an amazing job in keeping us in a position around social distancing and self-isolation and quarantine. And it's truly the Black and Brown communities that are keeping us safe during this time. But these workers do not have the right equipment or things like this to help keep them safe. And so that is a big concern. And social distancing isn't an option all the time for the Black community, who have to live in houses with generational families together. And so what does that all mean? So these are some of the big things that we talked about. Yesterday, it was a great conversation around the guidelines that are coming down from the CDC around mask wearing. And so I had quite a few young Black men on the call, and they were asking, they were highly concerned and very afraid of what does this mean for us when we have to deal with the police all the time and we're wearing a mask, and how does that impact us going outside or going into a grocery store or to a bank or any of those things when systemically we've had problems constantly. So the people aren't considering when they're bringing these guidelines forth, they're not thinking about a lot of the things that we've had to deal with. So I would say that that is from a community side, some of the things that we're dealing with. From a business side of things, I love our business community is really walking through the equity and the fairness around loan and grant processes. I can tell you, when I think about our barber shops, our beauty salons, all of those ones that don't have opportunities at all to apply for some of these loans. Many of them don't even know about the loans and the grants that are even available. They don't have information in our communities, as well as how can they what's the equity and the equality in these grants and these loans that the county and the city, how they are expecting us to be able to monitor those and to look at the rates, the demographic rates, who's getting those loans and how are they even, what's the qualification process? I personally have looked and tried to get a loan just to see what that qualification process is like. And there is not fairness and equity in all of that process. And so we need to ask the city and the county to be thinking, who's at the table? That's my question. Like when these decisions are being made of the processes, who's at the table having these conversations around processes of loans and those kinds of things. And it's true, many of the businesses in the Black community are unbanked, as we talked about that, and women-owned businesses too. So we need, again, more community banks and credit unions. We need to understand a lot of the rules in the game. And we need to make sure that our businesses in the Black community are not shut out in the process, and that we make it easier for them to get more loans. And the third thing I just want to bring up is about making sure, how are we communicating and getting information out into the Black community. Not everyone has a computer. Not everyone is, up to date and even understanding what's going on. So we have to be very mindful and cognizant and figure out how we can come together, and especially in the Black community, bringing all of our nonprofits, all of our organizations together under one roof to really have these types of conversations and to see how we can get like literally boots on the street even, and to make sure that the community as a whole know what's going on and what is accessible and available to them. The last thing I want to say is that we need to stop this colorblind policy approach on this whole pandemic, on how it's impacted and affected our community. Instead, I really think we should be color bold, and we should have an intentional focus on our communities of color, because COVID-19 pandemic has clearly shown that we have a moral imperative to make sure that we distribute resources and have access based on racial equality, especially when the most vulnerable communities are impacted here. Because if we can make sure that the vulnerable communities have access to things, it's all of us together. We'll elevate all of our communities together. And so that's it. I just want to share that and say that we're in this together, and I appreciate all of you on this call, and anything that we can do to be of service and of help to you, we certainly will be.
Thank you, Donna. And I do think, it is really highlighting historic inequities in a very real way, in terms of the impact on folks, the mortality that it has. All of the issues that are a challenge in our society are raised in a spotlight in a very real way, that is people's lives that are put on the line here. I want to share with you, at the county, we have taken a significant portion of our in-house. So the testing capacity, just so everyone knows, the county does a modest amount of internal in our own county public health lab testing. Then health systems have their own testing capacities. They run their own tests, they coordinate with us and report with us. And then commercial labs are a third way. We've taken a not insignificant amount of our testing capacity and dedicated it to our clinic partners in Southeast and South Bay to try and address some of those tests, because a lot of if the traditional testing is only done through the hospitals, we know that we don't have equity in terms of access to hospitals and health coverage and all of those types of things. And so we are trying to move and have been trying to move more testing into communities that are historically underserved. When we first reported, we were one of the first counties to report both our positives and our deaths by race. And we obviously adjust. Every positive does not come back to us with that information, because they come from a variety of sources. But when we first released the first tranche of positives, people said, well, it's tracking right along with the racial breakdown of San Diego County in terms of the percentages. And I said, but the problem with that is we know that there's an inequity in testing. And so if communities of color are showing positive at the same rate, even though we know they don't have the same access to testing, that shows us that there is an inequity in who's getting it and how it's being spread. And so we are definitely trying to do that. On the PPE, this is a global challenge of getting enough personal protective equipment. We have been able to supply personal protective equipment to MTS bus drivers and trolley operators. And it's not the medical grade, but it is face coverings and disinfectant and things like that. And we're continuing to work to try and get more every day. You know, we've sent our medical grade personal protective equipment to medical facilities, both clinics and hospitals. And then we're trying to provide things that are non-medical grade to community partners, whether they be alcohol or drug treatment centers or transit agencies or other folks. But it is a challenge, and the entire world is all trying to buy the same amount of things. And so we at the county, just to share, we get what we can from the state. The state primarily gets it through the feds. We are awaiting, the governor's recently announced deal where the state would independently buy significant quantities. When that starts arriving, we'll be in a much better position. But we've also expended considerable money just going onto the open market and buying things, buying ventilators, buying personal protective equipment, buying anything that we can get our hands on. And just expending the resource, knowing that it is really important in our region. So thank you for that. You're 100% right, and we have to continue to work to do better. So I appreciate that. Next, we're going to welcome Iris Garcia. She's the president of San Diego County's Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. This is the largest business association representing the San Diego Tijuana Hispanic business community. They have over 500 active members, and I will just say there are obviously challenges south of the border with coronavirus in terms of capacity and spread and what is happening down there. We are also seeing an uptick in positive numbers in our South Bay communities, and we're very aware of the fact that a lot of our healthcare workers live in Tijuana and come back and forth. And so what happens in south of the border impacts us all, because we still, even with the restrictions in place, we still are very interconnected. And so, Iris, we welcome you to share your thoughts and insights.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Supervisor Fletcher and Council Member Montgomery, for inviting the San Diego County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to talk here in front of the task force on behalf of the Latino community. We have been seeing an influx of calls from our community about their worries and struggles with coronavirus, and one of the main things, we have been providing a lot of information, SBA loans, and then we get return calls about some of the issues that they've been coming across. One of them was that the PP program, they're not offered at every bank, and Latinos tend to go to local banking. And on top of that, you also have the prejudgment of certain cultures. So I'd like to also thank Congressman Scott Peters and his staff for acknowledging that prejudgment that people are experiencing at the bank, on the bank level. And then we've also come across where the SBA EDL has been so slow, and so people that have already put in their application don't realize that there's an actual expiration date, and so they're getting a little bit more nervous. our community has been hurt in so many different ways, just because also a lot of them are in the hospitality industry. And so a lot of them had to now apply for unemployment. And we see another issue with, they don't even know where to start to apply. They don't know to go to the EDD site, and they have a hard time filling out those applications. A lot of that has to do with the lack of material in Spanish. There's not much bilingual material out there for them to actually follow those instructions. And so we've been trying to extend our hand as much as we can and translating and being there to give them information. But it seems like a lot of the information given to them is very plain, very simple, and they need something a little bit more intricate. When it goes to the store levels, we've been noticing that the little bodegas, the corner markets, during this global pandemic, where you're thinking that people are going to be extending a little extra help and helping their neighbors, we're seeing price gouging. And because again, a lack of information, many of them don't know where to turn to even report that meat has gone up 50%, that beans that there are just the staple in their food are now been raised to different prices. And then the bigger markets that have been able to sustain pricing that is, not over 10% of what they normally have, are also keeping in workers that they can't really afford, because they have them there to teach the clientele, the Latino community clientele there, about social distancing. Because it seems that they understand that there's a virus out there that can make them sick, and they have to keep their distance. But the rules that the CDC has put in place hasn't really filtered into the Latino community where they understand it. We also have them, Latino people, trying to find information about the stimulus package on whether they can actually, if they qualify. And that information has not been trickled down to them as well. We're doing our best as we can. We're also seeing payroll companies, payroll company issues. There's just a lot of misinformation, especially since a lot of predatorial loans are out there, a lot of predatorial people trying to bank on the misinformation and the language barrier. And so I would think that the best thing we could do is how-to videos in Spanish and provide them for the outlets and media platforms that most Latinos gravitate towards. So, and that is pretty much my take on what we've been getting phone calls and information in. We are the only positive that we've seen in the Latino community when it comes to sales and profitability is that we're seeing other minority groups and other community people entering into the markets where Latinos usually shop for their products. And unfortunately, it's led to them not being able to restock their shelves fast enough. So, thank you.
Thank you very, very much. We appreciate all of you for your work and your efforts, and we know the folks you represent need help, and we're doing our very best to try and deliver some of that help and assistance as we move forward. Next, I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Councilmember Montgomery, who's going to lead agenda item 7 and then see us through the conclusion of the meeting. I have to start something else at 2, but I want to thank everyone for your work and commitment and everything you all are doing out there. Councilmember Montgomery, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor. I'm tempted to leave this open for a little bit of discussion, but I think the next item is basically a roundtable, so we'll be able to voice your concerns or your experiences about anything that we have heard. I do want to let Ms. Donna know. Thank you for being on this call, all of you. Thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing with small businesses. It's really at times like these, it's the things that we most take for granted are the most important to us. And we hear the statistics all the time about how many people small businesses employ, and the chain that links us all together. But to see it kind of fall apart before our eyes is just daunting. And so to be in the middle of that, I know it also can take an emotional toll on all of you. So I want to thank you. I can say that At the city, we actually just this morning, we are requesting from our economic development department what the awards do look like, so that we can look at whether there are any disparities when we passed the item. And Ricardo can speak to this as well. We were very concerned that they were taking California Block Development Grant money, which is supposed to go to lower income communities, and putting it in one pot just for all businesses. And we advocated against that and made sure that that piece of the money was going to go to low to moderate income communities. We just want to see if that's panning out based on the awards. The challenge, there are many challenges, but one of the major challenges is that as government, we usually do have our disparity tests and our analytics that we can look at to make programs better. We're trying to get money out the door as soon as possible, and that's just on the one hand very good. On the other hand, it's, there are things that we do miss when it comes to how do we qualify for these things. We did base the qualifications off of the SBA qualifications, and that just it presents a whole bunch of problems, especially when we're dealing with a crisis. It really does. So we acknowledge that. We are looking into it, but we have, and I have to take responsibility for this now, but we have a rocky foundation when it comes to racial equity in the city. We just do. And so this has exacerbated that and really exposed many, many parts of that we have to deal with now more than ever. So I just want to acknowledge all of your comments, all of your work. I have a diverse community with all of so many wonderful people, and we've been hearing about so many different experiences in every single community. So grateful for you all. So because the next item is a roundtable, I'm going to let you do what I just did and just talk. And it will just, everyone will have the opportunity to share for a few minutes what responses your organizations have had around COVID-19.
Immediately, like, not immediately, today's Thursday,
Yeah.
Starting Monday, maybe the Monday.
Just jump in?
Jan and Jeff.
I'm going to call out names.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I got names here. So I'm going to get right into it. Let's, and then just for our bank members, please cover PPT rules and participation. We know that it.
Yeah, I'll have Elizabeth handle it then. I'll have Elizabeth.
Someone, if you're not on, please mute, because I'm hearing some other feedback. I hope it's not my voice that I'm hearing. Let's start off with Bank of America. Pamela, start off with you, and you can cover some of the rules, small business lending, mortgage deferments, credit cards, checking late fees, all of that good stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for letting us have the opportunity to do so. And so in response to COVID, obviously, just first and foremost, thank you to everybody just for everything that you're doing. We as a company are also trying to react very quickly to everything, taking care of our associates as well as our clients and the community. And so with that, specifically to your question on what we were doing for our clients, we had created the client associate program, the CAP, which will then provide clients with the opportunity to defer many of their payments. So for mortgages, they can defer payments and also add to the end of their loans. With the credit card payments, they can do that with that as well. And then also for even just small business loans or anything related to your checking account as far as fees, requests for refunds for any of that is definitely being honored at this time. Most of that you can do online and request that through our one-pager that we have created specifically for COVID response. So, and one thing I wanted to add just for the mortgages, that's currently it's not limited just to a 30-day or 90-day period of time. That's specifically open to the period of time that COVID is happening, as we know that this could be an ongoing issue for quite some time. So specifically with all of that being said, in addition to that, obviously with PPP, I know that a gentleman earlier had mentioned the changes to what is happening with PPP. We currently are still open and receiving applications. Of course, you know, right now for us, what Bank of America did do is we did have it as if you were a client with the bank. We were having those requests come through. We had then opened it up, you know, within 24 to 48 hours to then allow individuals who didn't have like lending, and we tried to expand that capacity to accept PPP. Within, I think right now we have about 300,000 applications, which is probably about 4 years worth of loans, which we've hired additional staff to try to process and get this out quickly as possible. Of course, it is a government federal program, which we're trying to work with them to make sure that we're within the guidelines to do so. But again, our people are on deck. They're doing that 24 hours a day. As far as what we're doing for the community, there were a couple of large announcements that happened nationally. First and foremost, Bank of America announced $100 million specifically to go out to support for our nonprofit partners in direct response to COVID. So all of this really was to go to individuals to provide immediate relief with everything that's going on. And that we then took here locally, and we looked at specifically 4 different categories, which would be hunger, homelessness, healthcare, crisis response, as well as gap funding here in San Diego specifically. So we got a small chunk of those funds and quickly deployed it within a couple of weeks. In addition to that, we've also announced $250 million for capital support for our local CDFIs. That still has to be announced as far as where that's going to be going. I know that they were taking a look at individual CDFIs that were prepared to take PPP applications so that we could help support them and get others who don't have a bank relationship to CDFIs to then get through that process. But I think that answers all of your questions. And if you have anything else, just let me know.
Well, thank you so much for all that you're doing. We're all working around the clock, so thank you. We'll get our next update from Citibank. So we're gonna go from the bankers, and then we're followed by small business policy, affordable housing, and then I'll wrap up with some comments, but let's go to Chi Elder.
Hi, thank you, Councilwoman and Co-Chair. So Citi is, we're providing a range of assistance measures, including fee waivers, hardship programs, and small business support. And this information is eligible to all of our clients upon request. The following assistance measures include for credit cards, waiver of the minimum payment due requirements and late fees for 2 statement cycles. For personal loans, there's deferrals of the monthly payment and waiver late fees for 2 statement cycles as well. And we'll report the account as current to the credit bureaus during the waiver period, unless the account was delinquent before the waiver period began. In terms of retail bank and small business, there's also fee waivers on safe deposit box fees and non-Citi ATM usage fees. This was actually effective April 3rd. And we're extending the fee waivers on monthly service fees, as well as penalty waivers for early certificate of deposit withdrawals for an additional 30 days through May 8th. The same applies for small businesses. We're extending the fee waivers, monthly service fees, and remote deposit capture fees, as well as penalty waivers for early CD withdrawals. And then in terms of the paycheck protection, Citi is pleased to support small businesses as a bank participating in the SBA's Paycheck Protection Program. Prior to launching our digital portal on April 8th, we accepted a number of PPP loan applications to test our process and origination capabilities to ensure the process was smooth as possible for our clients. To manage the volume, we accepted applications from Citi small business clients that meet the small business eligibility criteria in phases. We sent digital applications to all of our small business banking clients, and we created a form on our website for customers to register their interest. To date, we've received applications representing about $3 billion in loans. We're working with clients as quickly as possible to complete and submit their applications and have already started to disperse funds to clients. I would like to mention and provide some information on background that puts the size of our small business lending in context. Small businesses are served largely by branches, and since we have a relatively small branch footprint in the US, less than 700 branches, this has historically been a small segment for us. Given the scale of their branch networks, the other large banks are much more significant small business lenders. So the PPP data will undoubtedly reflect that. Nonetheless, we have a team from across the firm that have worked around the clock to build an entirely new digital platform to support small business clients for this program. So that is what we have, in terms of retail and small business and our loans. And then in the community, we are working with different nonprofits and community and business leaders to help to ensure that the support that we provide is flexible in terms of contribution and grant support.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have a couple of questions, but I will save those until the end. And we will have Sarah Bowles from JP Morgan Chase next.
Thank you. So similar to what some of my colleagues from other banking institutions have shared, JP Morgan Chase is putting into place a number of deferment and kind of programs to help support existing customers. So 90-day payment deferral for credit lines and loans, deferring payments and waiving fees on business credit cards. Also for those who are beginning to receive economic stimulus deposits, also waiving fees for customers that may have insufficient funds, making sure that they're able or who are overdrawn in their accounts to make sure that those funds are protected and that they can still access their full stimulus check. So really trying to put the needs of the customers kind of at the forefront during this time. We also have been actively supporting, partnering with the SBA's Paycheck Protection Program. Obviously, the SBA has now committed all of that initial round of funds from the program. So all of the customers who have applied and received funding in this first round have been notified, really hoping that Congress is, I know they're currently considering another round of funds, so hopefully that, moves forward. And we're continuing, during this interim time to continue to work through the existing queue of applications so that we will be well positioned, to action on those applications should that time hopefully come soon, and have roughly over 300,000 small businesses in some stage of the application process currently. I also wanted to just share some of the kind of philanthropic and more kind of community-based approaches that we're taking during this time. So the firm recently made a $50 million philanthropic commitment to help address both the immediate humanitarian and public health challenges from this pandemic, as well as, setting aside dollars to really be able to help with kind of the longer term recovery efforts. In addition, we're standing up a $150 million program to help community development financial institutions specifically in order to help get capital to underserved small businesses and nonprofits who aren't being served or haven't been able to be served by the existing programs. So really having a particular focus on underserved entrepreneurs in the hardest hit communities. So we know that there's a number of small businesses in particular that are being left out. And so we're hoping by working with our nonprofit CDFI partners that is kind of another mechanism and another tool to really be able to help assist in these recovery efforts.
Thank you so much for that and for going kind of that extra mile to try to ensure that, you know, we get some equity here during this crisis. Next, we're going to go to U.S. Bank. So Raquel is here, Vice President and Community Development Manager of Southern California Region at U.S. Bank.
Thank you, Councilman. You know, I guess I'd start by saying that for detailed information that really speaks to kind of the full scope of U.S. Bank's response, I'd urge people to take a look at our website. We've created a COVID-19 response landing page that really provides a pretty broad view of our efforts in support of employees, our customers, and our community. So I'll just kind of run through that and give you maybe a high-level overview of those efforts. In terms of employees, we have about 30,000 frontline employees nationally, and really because of their extra efforts in serving our clients, really at the point of contact at the branches, the bank has put into effect a 20% wage increase for those employees through the course of the COVID crisis. And we've also made some significant adjustments to our operating hours as well. From the standpoint of community, we made a $30 million commitment really to focus on our health and human services and community partners who are delivering those services across the footprint. In terms of that commitment, we've created some national partnerships, both with United Way. The United Way focus is really on enhancing 211 services and providing direct support to kind of hardest hit communities. We've partnered with Operation Hope around financial education, including delivering financial education to communities in a virtual format. And then we've also launched a national partnership with LIST to really look at ways in which to provide support and relief for our small business partners. In terms of our giving, we've also, and this really has an impact locally, we've been reaching out to our local partners who we've provided grant funding to and really added a significant layer of flexibility to their use of funds, really allowing them to use what would in the past have been program support for general operating support or COVID relief efforts. In addition, we stood up a national market impact fund of about $1 million that provided grants in 30 of our markets to really provide additional dollars directed to COVID relief efforts and that work. In San Diego, we are an investor with the San Diego Foundation's COVID Relief Fund. They were successful in receiving that national award. From a product standpoint, and again, there have been just a number of adjustments in terms of both fees and pricing and structure. And really the overall goal of that from both the consumer side and the small business side has been to provide our clients, our consumer clients and our small business clients with the flexibility and the affordability that they need in order to navigate this really challenging environment. And so when you look on our website, you'll see kind of a range of both pricing changes, fee waivers, and other kinds of adjustments, as well as, and what we encourage people to do is really to contact us and talk to us about what their situation is. And then let us talk to you and work through solutions and options that are available. In terms of the Paycheck Protection Plan, we're a significant small business lender, and we've had a really huge volume of applications, and literally thousands of folks have been at work creating the systems and the processes, both in an automated way, literally building them in an automated way, and also in a manual way to continue to assist our customers. While the funding has now been, hopefully I'll use the word paused, for those applications that are still in the queue that have not been approved for funding, we're still working to do everything we can with those applications that are pending so that with anticipation the spigot will be turned on again. Those applicants will be ready to move forward. And really the goal is to be able to assist as many clients as possible. And we put a lot of time and energy into kind of building the system as we go, and being as responsive to as many of our clients initially, but being as responsive as we possibly can to as many businesses as we can. And that's kind of a high level summary. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. That was a lot, even in a high level summary. So thank you for all you're doing. We're gonna go now to Frank Robinson at Union Bank.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. First of all, to Donna, as somebody who was born and raised in Baton Rouge and who has a lot of family in New Orleans, I understand about Katrina. I think my mother had 12 people at her house staying there during that, and then the floods in Baton Rouge. So, yeah, this is hitting home all over again. Let me give you the response from Union Bank. First of all, like a lot of my colleagues, please go to, we encourage people to go to the website. We have a lot of information there. As far as mortgages are concerned, we are also doing, we have initiated a 3-month forbearance plan on that. So people could be okay with their mortgages they have with the Union Bank. On the small business side, we are offering assistance with their monthly payments. The PPP, just to give you an example, and I think this was a level of frustration that most people had about the PPP, there was a provision in there that said you had to know your customer, KYC. And the only people that any bank would know would be their own clients, of course. And you had to have this for the SBA. And so that's why a lot of the banks, we initially had to go with your own clients, because that was actually within the SBA guidelines for them to get funded. And so I just wanted to mention that to everybody else on the call, because that was something that I know a lot of frustration that helped out there in the community. Now, we're a small business lender also, and we saw explosive growth in this area. We actually did more applications in the last 2 weeks, SBA applications, than we did in the last 6 years. So you can imagine our folks were working overtime. Many of them has said they were probably working, 20 hours a week, 20 hours a day. I mean, they were only getting like 4 hours of sleep because they had to just keep churning and burning. But as you know, from communication last night, the SBA has indicated that all the funds for the PPP have been depleted. So that's where we are right now. As far as our foundation, we are supporting local foundations in this, local nonprofits in this area, including Feeding San Diego, Lift, City Heights CDC, 211 San Diego, East County CDC, Axion, Serving Seniors, and International Rescue Committee with our COVID response. Our CRA loans and investment group did something really great. When this thing first started out, they knew that we weren't going to be able to help every small business that were going to be in those fringe areas, and what we're talking about, especially diverse businesses, those that are just, we consider micro businesses. So we actually did a loan with two CDC Small Business Finance of $1 million, and they turned around and loaned that money out to micro businesses in those communities. And that was our goal, was to do maybe $20,000-$30,000 deals to help businesses get through this kind of issue. And so we actually partnered with our CRA loans and investment team to get that loan approved within 3 days. And those monies have already been dispersed. As you know, within our branches, some of the branches are closed. And those employees we've actually had work remotely, and they're on our call center to help answer the questions of a lot of our clients have had. And our branches are open from 10 to 4. We are closed on Saturdays. And then one other thing that we're wanting to suggest was, and I think was brought up earlier, was about virtual volunteering. I think there's a need to somehow build virtual volunteerism, especially in the world, especially in the area of financial education, financial planning, how to go through this crisis and be okay. Because I think, and we can do that. There's enough bankers in the community that will be amenable to having conference calls or having some type of, even these Zoom type scenarios, to make sure that we can educate community groups, whether they be with the chambers or whether they be with nonprofit organizations that are in those communities. And that concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Frank. And we will go to our last bank, Antonio Barbosa, Vice President of Community Relations of Greater San Diego Region at Wells Fargo.
Thank you, Councilwoman Montgomery. In regards to customer support, Wells Fargo suspended residential property foreclosure sales, evictions, and involuntary automobile repossessions. We are offering fee waivers, payment deferrals, and other expanded assistance for credit card, auto mortgage, small business, and personal lending for customers who contact us. We defer more than 700,000 payments, representing almost 1.8 billion, and provided over 150,000 fee waivers, exceeding 28 million so far for impacted customers. As mentioned today, funding for the PPP has been fully allocated, but Wells Fargo will continue to prepare applications in our existing pipeline from small business and mid-sized businesses, and will submit them to the SBA when funds become available. Given the magnitude of the crisis the country is facing, we are hopeful that the Congress will be approve additional funds for the PPP, and we will continue accepting new applications, so we will be ready to proceed if and when that happens. Something very important, we'll be donating fees generated through the PPP as charitable grants to nonprofits that support small businesses. We are granting payment relief to for small business customers up to 90 days, as well as fee waivers, payment deferrals, increases to lines of business of credit for disaster relief, and other expanded assistance for deposits. Small business lending, practice finance, and SBA products that customers who contact us. Also, we are encouraging customers to continue making their mortgage payments if they can, but we are granting an immediate 90-day payment suspension for any Wells Fargo home lending customer who requests assistance. We won't be charging any late fees of these customers or reporting past due status to the customer reporting agencies. For students, we are offering payment arrangements of a 90-day payment deferral, as well as other longer-term deferral options for impacted students who reach out, as well as suppressing negative credit reporting. We are temporarily closing about 25% of our branches. Of our open branches, more than 90% are operating with various formats to protect customers and employee safety, including drive-through window service, teller stations protected by see-through barriers, and service by appointment only. In terms of community support, we are donating 175 million to support economic recovery for communities, small business, and vulnerable populations affected by COVID-19. Our three pillars are housing affordability, small business growth, and financial health. We have been working really close already with our local SBDCs and CDFIs. As other of our colleagues, we are also letting them use the funding to whatever they think is more important. We are not expecting for them to apply for specific programs. We are providing the grants, and we are letting them decide where where is the most needed area to support. And that's my report.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our banks. We're going to, oh, just as an aside, Daisy is taking notes. So we're just gathering all the information so that if there are any gaps we need to fill or any questions we have later, we have a comprehensive look at all that you all are providing and trying to do right now to help us all get through this crisis. So we are now going to move over to our small business organizations, and we're going to start off with Ricardo Flores, Executive Director at LISC.
Thank you very much, council member. So one thing to think about, council member, as you guys find out within the city where those loans are, if you do see a concern about where those loans are not, let us know, because LISC, IRC, and Small Business Development Center had, as you know, put together a proposal to put funding from the city into small businesses in inner city communities like your district. So we have a pipeline created. We already have a process created, so we can deploy that capital if need be. So on our end of it, we are in grant mode. We're just looking for grants because for us right now, if you're a small business, you're going to need a grant. Your loans are a little bit tricky for you. So you're looking for grants. Our nonprofit partners, again, grants. And then also individuals in our communities to try to help them out. We work, as you all know, with the IRC and the San Diego Housing Commission, with our Bridges to Career and Financial Opportunity collaboratives. And so, those individuals are suffering because they either don't have income coming in or income's been drastically reduced. So we're working with those partners to try to get grants out. We're also at the national level and locally trying to raise money. So we've a U.S. Bank provided some capital to LISC at a national level, and part of that's going to be coming to San Diego. So we're very excited about that. The other thing that we've gotten an interesting partnership with Verizon right now, where they are investing in LISC, and we're putting that money through to our local markets. We've gotten several businesses and nonprofits funded from that. We're anticipating more funds from Verizon. The other thing, has been mentioned here before, is we are, as a CDFI, we are looking to, at the PPP program as a way to support the businesses in the neighborhoods that we're serving. As was mentioned by a lot of our banking partners, there has been some challenges in getting that to all communities. And so we know that we have existing relationships, so we're interested in that program. So to our partners in the federal government, Jason and others, please, as you guys look towards putting more money out, look at CDFIs as a way to get some of that money out in the hard to reach places, because again, groups like ours have that infrastructure already in place. We have partnerships in place. We can deploy that money. Let me think. Yeah, that's really kind of about it. Again, the goal is just really to get capital to move it out. And so for folks on this call or for folks around our table, if your organizations have capital and you're saying, hey, we want to put that capital out, look to groups like LISC to be able to help do that, because we have that infrastructure and we have those relationships in place.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. We're going to go now to Elizabeth Schott, at CEO at Axion.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, council member, and thank you everyone for being on this call. I know, and for all the work that each of you are doing. I know that I've been on the phone at late night hours over the weekend with some of you, and I know we're all working towards helping our community in various avenues in this situation. So thank you to everybody again. I just want to let everybody know that our team has been fully operational and remote since early March, and we are certainly continuing our work in the local community and also servicing our small business clients. We are also doing all of our events digitally at this point. And so as we have events that continue to come out, as long as you're on our email list, those are still happening. We're just transitioning them digitally, as many organizations are obviously doing. I would say our approach in response has been three-pronged, and I'll talk about each one. The initial response is obviously we have a portfolio of small business clients throughout our region that need relief. And so our team has been working nonstop, taking phone calls from our existing portfolio of small business clients, many of which are in the retail, restaurant, small storefront, mom and pop type businesses, which in this particular situation have been one of the hardest hit. And so we have about 40% as of today of our existing clients who have contacted us that need relief. And so we are providing that. And we are currently both deferring payments for our loan clients as well as restructuring so that they have alleviation or minimized payments for up to 6 months at this point. So that's been a lot of our efforts, has been directly responding in a timely fashion to those clients to get them the relief that they need so that they have that cash flow to prioritize more important expenses at this point for their families and for their needs in the community. The second prong is that we are providing an abundance of education. Our business development officers and our loan processors are getting calls nonstop from small businesses, both our existing clients as well as additional new small businesses that need education. And so we have actually provided a landing page, which is socal.accion.org/COVID resources. And Daisy has a copy of that, which I know she'll be distributing that. And we've sent it out via email to our over 8,000 contact list in the community of small businesses. And we are updating that landing page with every single resource that we are aware of that is a valid resource in the local community. And we have translated that page into both English and Spanish. So we are updating it about twice a day as we know of additional resources that are happening in the community. And we are pushing that out both all of our social media channels, our email lists, and through all of our partners. We are continuing to educate people about fraudulent activity because we are hearing the same types of things that other partners on this call have shared. And we are making sure that we are aware and that our team is fully educated about all the different resources that we have. And we've been working very closely with Danny at the Small Business Development Center, as well as our other partners around the table. The third prong that I would share is that we are in multiple levels of conversations with various partners in regards to lending initiatives, specifically for a COVID relief product. And we've been working very hard to look at our operational systems as well as capacity as an organization to deploy a product such as this. So we are in multiple levels of conversations with various folks in regards to being able to roll something out as a CDFI that is a specific COVID relief product. And so as soon as we have more details that we can share with folks about that, we certainly will share with all of you that are on the phone. And, you know, if there are any additional banks looking, as Ricardo said, to place capital with a CDFI to serve, you know, these populations of small business owners, we certainly are amenable to those conversations and very willing with our infrastructure and history as a CDFI in the San Diego community to do so. So, you know, I think those are some of the things that we're focused on. And, you know, I know that our team is really trying to support small business owners with whatever resources we're aware of through each and every one of your organizations and partnerships that we have at hand. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Let's go on over to Mitch Johnson at IRC. Mitch,
you're on mute.
Let's try that again. Thank you, Council Member.
Of course.
For those who may not be familiar, IRC Center for Financial Opportunity, or CFO, delivers integrated economic empowerment services that builds multiple paths to self-sufficiency. Within CFO, there are three main program areas: workforce development, small business development, and financial education with complementary loan products that help address these serious barriers. Amidst the COVID-19 outbreak, the IRC has developed program continuity by providing remote intensive workforce services, financial capabilities coaching, micro-enterprise counseling, technical assistance, and in-language Zoom-based trainings covering topics such as CV-19 grant and capital resources, financial literacy with a focus on mobile banking, and workforce development. These innovative program offerings are coupled with services in response to our clients' emergency needs. As already discussed, refugees, immigrants, and other low-income individuals face a range of barriers accessing COVID-19 specific financial resources, including lack of access to technical support for grants and loan capital, limited comfort with state and federal systems, and lack of integration or relationships into mainstream financial system, which prevent many low-income families from accessing these resources available to them. To this end, IRC programs have quickly pivoted to expand benefit screening, to expand extended benefit screening, which includes direct submission of CalWIN applications on behalf of clients, supporting eligible clients to apply for unemployment insurance. In just the last 3 weeks, we've helped submit over 200 unemployment insurance applications, community-based rental, food, and utility assistance grants, the City of San Diego Small Business Relief Grants, the EIDL and PP loan applications from SBA, and then no interest resilience microloans from our CDFI. And most recently, we were assisting a number of clients, non-tax filers, to access their economic impact payments. Much like Elizabeth said, our CDFI CEO is immediately freezing interest for all active loans for a 6-month period. And we are also looking to develop a 0% COVID response bridge fund too. So we would also be very open to having any conversations with our bank partners to support that as well. A lot of the issues that our clients are facing with EIDL and PP have been previously discussed, and I'm very happy to hear Congressman Peterson's office is already aware of those, and I appreciate Frank giving us some more information about the limitations that banks had in serving some of our clients. So I want to speak specifically about the San Diego Business Small Relief Fund and some of the struggles our entrepreneurs are having. Many of our sole proprietors or independent contractors are getting denial letters because they don't have employees, although they count themselves as an employee, and that's not specified in the announcement. So we're having a lot of people that aren't qualified for unemployment and are not able to access the business fund. In addition, a number of our sole proprietors don't have payroll expenses because they hire their family members as part of it and use owner withdrawal fund for the entire family, and they're also not qualifying. And lastly, a lot of our clients that are home-based businesses are not qualifying for that fund. One other issue that we're seeing a lot with our new arrivals or our new arrivals is that either they've been recently placed in a job or they hadn't had an opportunity to be placed for the job. And if they're not qualifying for TANF, they're really struggling because there's no job opportunities right now and they're not eligible for unemployment. So we're seeing a severe gap in funds needed for those families. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that feedback. We did receive that same feedback from our bid actually yesterday at their monthly meeting. So that is definitely an issue throughout the city of San Diego. So thank you for that feedback. And so speaking of policy, before we go to our affordable housing partners, we're going to turn to Kara Green, the Executive Director at CPI, just to discuss policy impacts on LMI families.
Thank you for that, Council Member. You know, it's always been an interesting thing for the Center on Policy Initiatives for me to be here as part of this group because we don't have a member base. We don't deal in capital. We are a working people's think tank. We organize organizations that work to represent the interests of working families in this region. And I have to say that in this moment, it's been one of the most frustrating periods of time for us. Because what we're experiencing, the things that we've been fighting for and advocating for in this space and others for over 20 years, and being largely ignored or losing on those fights, means that families are suffering more in this moment than they should. This is not just a public health crisis. This is not primarily an economic crisis that's new for the families that are suffering. It's been that suffering expanded because we have not been willing to address the structural problems facing them. All of this has become more challenging in a moment where local and federal governments are moving faster than the speed of the people. And I want to say that I appreciate the frustrations that people are experiencing because, you know, and also the intention to move fast because we're trying to meet the needs of folks. But the reality is that moving fast to reallocate public resources to the most privileged is worth very little to nothing to the families at the bottom of the income distribution who struggle every day and are now at the end of the line for help and assistance. Some of the challenges that we're seeing throughout this process is that we have disproportionately the low income families and communities here. We have folks who have to go to work, who still have to be on the front lines, who don't have adequate access to protective equipment. And in fact, what they keep reminding us of is that there's too much of a focus on protective equipment, which is the least effective way to protect people. The most effective practices like deep cleaning and long-term and dealing with air systems, those are being ignored in this moment. And those are things that we have the resources to actually do in this moment to protect people. But the clear message is that their real health and well-being is not of concern. It's the people who still have resources, who are the clients who are being protected, and not the folks who serve on the front lines in this work. And I would say that some of that frustration is not only directed at government, but to our banking partners as well. Because we've been asking you for years to consider, when you think about who is credit worthy, to think about good business practices as a component of that, who protects health and safety, because that should place them at lower risk in a good regulatory system. And we've been largely ignored on that as being outside of what's reasonable to consider. But those same businesses, by the way, are operating today. They're expanding their profits, and they're doing so on the backs of their workers. We have folks who are fearful because they're out of work to stand up for their workplace rights. And in this way, we talk a lot about the frustration with government. We've asked for better enforcement of workplace rights and protections. Those systems were already overwhelmed, doing too little to reach out to people. And in this moment of fear, folks are going to go to work. They're going to endanger themselves and their families because they're too afraid to come forward and the system doesn't respond to them. So we're working hard in those spaces. And then we have the challenge, which we've talked about, which expands. And I just want to say, I like everybody here on a personal level. I just have to talk about the systems that we're all a part of. We've also worked hard with our workforce development folks to talk about what kind of workforce are we preparing. And I want to just note that if we go back and look at where we've made workforce investments over the last decades, it's some of the same industries that are hardest hit, where people were making some of the lowest wages. And those low wages mean that this crisis hits them immediately. It's why we don't have savings, right? It's why immediately upon losing a paycheck or even just a relatively small cut in hours, families are suffering. So again, as we think about this immediate crisis, thinking about the long-term structural change that ought to happen is critical work that we're doing at CPI. The last thing I'm going to say is that some of the things I've heard here are contributing to the problem, frankly. Requiring people to request assistance or deferrals is unfair. The reality is banks have data. You know which of your clients are in the midst of suffering, and there could be active outreach to those clients in the languages that they speak to assist them. And we will be working with our national partners to push for exactly that kind of implementation on the business side. It's also the case that the folks here are part of powerful networks that lobby the government at every level, all of the time. And those same resources could have been used and should be used to support work around things like PPP. The reality is, I understand that banks didn't make the decision to prioritize their clients, but I think everybody here understands that that is baking in inequality into the system. And the reality is we haven't even talked about the differences in which banks were prepared, and even among the minority clients they serve, which ones, what's the relationship between banks that took a little longer to respond and how much of the minority population they serve. These are all things that we could, and I've seen great work happen in this space, but we should step it up. We should advocate together for the kind of structural changes that we know that people deserve. And so as you can imagine, doing that work, we're pretty busy at CPI. Thank you, Council Member.
Thank you so much. I will call you Dr. Green at this moment. You really hit the nail on the head, that the systemic things that we continue to do and what we're doing through this crisis is like, it's taking a lot of time that people need to try to hold the bottom up. And so we're not going to do it doing things the same way we've always done it. So thank you so much for speaking truth to that. And so with that, we are going to now go to San Diego Housing Federation. I think Steve Russell, you are here to speak with us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this discussion. It's very, very valuable to hear what's going on. Kira, thank you for your work. So first off, I want to say our Fair Housing Conference was reformatted from a live event this month to a webinar on May 19th from 1 to 4 p.m. It'll be free. and Pacific Western Bank is one of our sponsors. LISC, thank you, Ricardo. Cal HFA and Zillow, of all people, come in as sponsors for that, but we'd encourage you to participate. One of the first things our organization did when this crisis became really emergent was to create a resources page. So we do have, if you go to our website, click on resources, there's a COVID-19 link, and we're doing our best to just keep up all the categories of resources that are needed out there that are available. We also reoriented all of our education programs. First of all, of course, taking them from in-person to online, and two in particular, the Resident Services Support Network, which is for resident service providers, and the Supportive Housing Learning Network, which is for supportive housing providers. We're essentially combined, redoubled our efforts, so we're doing 2 of these webinars with 2 topics a month, where we're really trying to work with, to identify what some of the needs are that folks have, and to address simple questions like how do you conduct services when you have to do it remotely, and how do you, what kinds of programs do our members do in order to outreach to help combat isolation. And it's just a host of issues that we're working on right now that are not the topics that we had scheduled mere 6 weeks ago. And we're doing it in a rolling basis where we're always looking ahead this is almost every 2 weeks, so we're looking ahead to make sure that the topics that we're addressing are being timely. The next session we're going to be doing on the 28th will actually include some discussion of how to communicate people who are looking to avoid eviction, because I think a lot of information did not get out there as to what people needed to do in order to actually avail themselves of the deferral of an eviction. So, and there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of different systems in the county, a lot of different responses. So we're going to be covering some of that on the 28th. But again, it's about reorienting all of our programming to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our resident service providers and our supportive housing folks. In addition, our roundtables have been reoriented in a similar way. We've also started a weekly forum for both owner-operators. So once a week we get together, and owner-operators of affordable housing in one forum, another one for developers and financiers of affordable housing, so we can get a sense of what is actually happening there on the ground. So week to week we can be responsive and we can share best practices amongst us. I think one of the things that came out of that is we're monitoring the ability of our residents to pay rent. And for April, it was actually remarkably good. The range was from 75 to 90% of the rents were collected, were expected. But one of the things we also learned that was no surprise is that with senior buildings, seniors are covered by their Social Security, their rent is paid. Permanent supportive housing is paid for by vouchers. It's families whose income is almost entirely from wages who are struggling. That's where we're seeing folks who are falling short and not able to make their rental payments. Immediately, this is an issue for those families, but in the long term, even rent deferral programs simply put the debt on the far end. It doesn't actually relieve folks of their obligation. And each of the individual affordable housing communities is an independent, is a LLC of its own. It is a business entity. And we're concerned about the overall stability of those. And so we're working with the Housing Commission, we're talking to the council. You'll see a response from, we've been going back and forth with Rick Gentry on this to see how we can help make sure that the affordable housing system remains more stable. And at the same time, we're participating in a group. We're hoping to get a grant from the foundation that would, where we'd be a hub for information that would be really reaching out to resident service providers, and then a lot of the diverse communities that exist in City Heights. Price is asking us to step forward and do this and convene folks so that we can make sure that the resources that are out there are actually accessible to people through a means, both technological, culturally, and linguistically, that they can actually access that. So we're hoping to begin that work. We're having a meeting with Price Philanthropies tomorrow to talk about that. We're hoping to begin that work. And we see this as a replicable model where if we can meet the cultural and linguistic needs of City Heights, we've essentially covered the world. Everybody knows what City Heights is like. So we're really pleased to be moving forward. It's a complete re-engineering in many ways of our strategic plan just over the last 5 weeks. And I give kudos to my team for being so flexible, and to the supporters, many of you who are on the phone here. But our focus right now in terms of larger advocacy is we've got to get rental subsidies into the hands of working families. So whatever stimulus comes into the state, whatever new programs are being developed federally, we have got to look at feeding the front end. This top-down stuff is not working. If we can feed resource to the folks on the ground, it will trickle up. It will rise up. There are mechanisms to draw that money upward built into the system. we do not need to wait for trickle down. So we're advocating for more direct rental subsidies to working families.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you. Agreed. Thank you for that. And we're going to move on to Peter Armstrong, Wakeland.
Hi. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the discussion so far. You really resonated a lot of things that have been on my mind over the last month. So thank you for that. One thing I would suggest, however, and I think it's fantastic that the County of San Diego has been releasing their test results and deaths by race. I think it would be fantastic if the state, we have some folks on the call that maybe has some influence over the state and federal policymakers. I would love to see that information. Every county, every state release that information to us as the public, so that we do not have to have journalists figure it out. We don't have to do watchdogs go out there and get that information. I think it should be completely transparent and available to us, because we know that this pandemic is having a disproportionate impact. And we see that. We just need to see the data to help us right these wrongs. I guess I would echo Steve's comments. Some good news to share. This past month, Wakeland, for April, we received 90% of our rents that were due. So that's really great news, and I'm really moved by our tenants' ability to continue to pay their rent. And that's fantastic news. And some more good news to share. Over the last month, while we've been struggling with this crisis, Wakeland has had the really good fortune to get 2 new projects under construction. So we have 127 units that we've closed our construction financing on that will house seniors who are low income, who are experiencing homelessness. So that was a tremendous victory for Wakeland. Wells Fargo is our financial partner in that project, and certainly the city of San Diego. One of these projects is in Claremont, one is in Grantville. The city of San Diego really did great work to get us our building permits. And we have funding from both the Housing Commission and the city in those projects. And, for us, that's really what it's all about. We want to get these projects under construction. We want to get people off the streets into stable housing. I think that's really our mission. And so we've been really blessed to be able to get those projects under construction. And, for largely all of our projects that are under construction are continuing to move forward. The biggest delay of late has just been the rain. So we're very thankful to have some clear, sunny skies, and look forward to getting back to work on our projects. I would say that, some of the things that are happening at Wakeland we're really doing a lot of work to help our residents. So we have seniors who are living in our properties who have fixed incomes, who are paying their rent, but they don't have access to food. So we're trying to bring food into our projects. We're also trying to provide. We often do after-school classes for children. Financial literacy, other types of social service type programs. And we haven't been as, effective because we have to socially distance, and, we're ramping up our ability to deliver those services online. That having been said, our social service providers are sort of on the front lines with our residents, trying to help them make sure that they're applying for all of the benefits that they're eligible for. And so sort of the nature of our work has become a little bit more tied to those very basic things that people need to live and survive and to stay functional. And as everybody else has already said, I think, this pandemic has really demonstrated who's privileged and who's not. I have the good fortune of my white collar job to be able to work safely and not have to, make the decision to whether or not to protect my health or to earn a paycheck. I don't have to make that compromise or that difficult decision. And it is really a blessing that we should all be able to have that level of safety. So thanks to everyone who's really stepping forward to trying to make that reality. I know we have a lot more work to do, but hopefully this pandemic will add extra focus and diligence to our work to help bring that about. So thank you very much.
Peter, thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to have our last speaker from the MAC project, Adolfo Ventura.
Councilmember, Adolfo's had to leave early. He let us know that he had a negotiation. He did send me a note, and I'll get him to summarize everything, but it was a lot of what Peter and Steve said. He said that they've got rent payments for, it was about 82%, so about in the middle of the range that Steve said. But those ones that they don't, we know what the margins all of these affordable housing properties operate on. So this is going to impact these organizations deeply. But a lot of it, just as Peter said, is also about helping the residents to meet their basic needs. And so they're looking for diapers, food, not just for seniors, but for families. We've heard about the school, school feeding programs are being out. These are a lot of the same issues that we're hearing from down in the Achievement Academy at the Housing Commission too. Just things as simple as even to go get the food at the food bank, you need a car, right? You need gas money if you have a car, or you need a bus pass. If you get on the bus, you can only take one, maybe 2 bags of groceries, and you're trying to feed a whole family. So as people have said, the disparities, the whole, they say things, like the dinosaur sneezes, it's the mice that get trampled, and these systemic problems that we're already seeing are only going to get worse, which are so disheartening. But maybe change, a crisis brings a change, and that's our job to figure out what we can do.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm gonna go ahead and before I go to your staff report, which will be the last thing, I just want to say thank you again to everyone who is on our Zoom call and who is watching. We in my office, one of the challenges with dealing with this crisis is that we as governments are putting a lot of programs and things out there, but the implementation or walking folks through those things is something that we tend to shy away from. That 211 is doing a really good job. We're trying to put more effort in that area, but we have implemented our emergency communications protocol at my office. And so for folks who don't get our email blasts, who are not online, the number is 619-236-6644. We are answering calls. It does not matter what your issue is. We will, at the very least, get you to where you need to be. That is the least that we can do right now with putting all of these programs and things, and relief funds and everything else out there, that we need to be able to walk folks through this until we can change the system and get more of a bottom-up approach. And while we're doing that part and that work, we really are focusing on getting people through this time. My biggest fear is that we will lose hope. When I talk to people, they're right at the edge. And that's my biggest fear, because when we take away, this virus really has taken away a lot of dignity from people, the things that we see as our identity. And I just don't want us to lose hope. So we try to be there to provide a lending hand during this time, while we try to change the way that we get this relief to people, because everybody's not going to be able to fill out an application. People fill out applications, they find out later that the qualifications are different than what they thought. It's just, we've heard it all here in this meeting and just out there when we're dealing with our client base. So it's very real. And so that's what we are doing. Please send us anything that you want to go out. We were doing daily blasts at the beginning of this thing, daily email blasts with any information that was coming to us. It is a lot of information. At the same time, we do have to get through that and read as much as we can to get through this time. We in Southeastern San Diego do have a rapid response fund through the Jacobs Center. We are distributing those funds to nonprofits in our area that are especially helping with food security right now, but also other issues. So we do have that going. We do need additional assistance for our smaller businesses, what we call mom and pop stores, because they're just not, with the setup the way it is right now, they won't make it through this. So we need additional help there. And so I just want to make sure you all know that we are in an emergency protocol, communications protocol right now. We're answering everything 7 days a week within 24 hours, trying to keep people on the up and up and trying to find a way through all of this systematic stuff that we have put out here to try to get through this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Daisy for our last item, which is our staff report.
Great, thank you very much, Councilmember. If I could add to what you said too, I think everyone here has seen it, but nobody mentioned it, so I just want to put it into the record. And that is, we've heard about the digital divide for all of the children that are having to be at home at school, but we're also seeing it in all these applications, right? And so if you don't have a device, maybe you have a device, but you don't have bandwidth because you're used to going to the library or you're used to going to Starbucks. In this world of social distancing, you both don't have that, and also maybe you're just not familiar enough with this, or it's English as a second language and you're trying to navigate all these applications and there's nobody there who can help you one-on-one, really. We've heard a little bit about it today. Steve, I was thrilled to hear that you guys are putting that in the resident webinar, the service provider webinars, talking about what does hands-on services, one-on-one service look like in area of social distancing, because we don't know how long this will go on. It could be up to, people are saying up to 2 years. And I have a horrible feeling that we're all going to look back and we're going to remember the first time this happened in 2020, and so we really need to set up new systems and build the protection for the people that we're talking about into these systems. So that's a great segue into the one item that I have for the staff report is the comment letter that we put in as an organization, the RTF, for the rework of the Community Reinvestment Act. The current administration has taken calls for change that have been made by both the financial institutions and the advocates for years about how to modernize CRA, but thrown a whole lot of other stuff in there that would just completely undermine the work that all of your organizations are trying to do in low and moderate income communities. And so we have talked about this in various forms. We put in a very early comment letter in the first round. The second round was due last week. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency declined to extend the deadline, even though we're all focusing on other things. They should be focusing on other things. They shouldn't be doing this when nobody's looking, but they declined to extend it. We put in language into the letter at your advice saying we support suspending this process or possibly even ending it until the crisis is over. And our two co-chairs also signed a separate letter from the California Reinvestment Coalition that asked for, demanded an extension or suspension of the rulemaking process. So now we wait. We see if any of that is impactful. Our biggest hope lies with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve banks did not get involved in this rulemaking. They did not support the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency's effort. And so that's one of the strong arguments everyone has too, is we can't set up two parallel systems. And so the Federal Reserve has put forth arguments that are much closer in line with what we want, that would strengthen supports for LMI people. And so if the process isn't abandoned at all, perhaps the Federal Reserve can have more sway over the ultimate outcome. But now we wait. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you so very much. We will adjourn this meeting today. That concludes the meeting. The staff report concludes the meeting, and then we will be meeting October 8th, 2020. That is our next meeting. Virtual hugs to all of you. And please, please, please stay safe and healthy, and let's push ourselves to take advantage of this moment to ensure that no one is hungry anymore and that our people don't lose hope. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Council.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.